Hi, and welcome to the HR Disrupted podcast, where I'm joined today by the co-founder with me of Disruptive HR, Karen Moran. Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thank you. Yeah, spring's on its way. It's lovely. So we speak to hundreds, if not thousands, of HR professionals every year,
We
and
do.
they continue to tell us that their biggest problem is that they have too many people leaders who are no good at leading people. and
A bit of a
it's so
worry, really, isn't
it's
it?
just a bit of a shame, isn't it? But I mean, it's really, I think it's just so sad. We're still promoting people into leadership or management roles, people management roles, and they wanted the promotion, the progression, the extra salary, all good, valid reasons, but they're just not motivated. They don't get their kicks by leading other people. They're great individual contributors, but they still struggle to kind of even do the basics of people leadership well, don't they? And now there are clearly alternatives
Yeah.
to that, not promoting reluctant leaders, alternative career paths, etc. But that's a whole other topic, a subject for another day. Today, what we're going to look at is how you can develop the people leaders that we've already got. And I mean, we've done some real horrors, haven't we,
Oh
as
gosh,
HR
yes.
directors?
Yeah.
So mainly we're going to be talking about the mistakes we've made as HR directors in trying to get people leaders to do it better.
I think as well we have to take some responsibility of us in HR, again, our mistakes of expecting leaders to just do the processes that we keep peddling out, and then we wonder why they're not infused and excited about their role. So I think there is actually an opportunity
Yeah,
for us to not have all of that, and just to say your primary purpose is to get the best out of your team.
yeah,
We're not going to give you all these processes. We're not going to make you jump through hoops. Just
yeah.
do it your own way, don't you think?
I do. And I think that it's probably worth unpicking where we feel leadership development has gone wrong
Yeah.
in the past. And again, no higher moral ground here. We've
No.
done everything that we are about to criticise. But then to offer some alternatives as we go through this podcast today. And as you say, I think there are lots of things that we can do differently that are not costly, that actually are highly engaging, but we kind of need to acknowledge where things have gone wrong first
Yeah.
before we can then refresh. So let's kick off with what we think's gone wrong with leadership development.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, what stands out is that we've positioned leadership development and leadership as that they need to be some kind of superhero. We've told leaders that they need to be kind of brilliant at everything. They need to be strategic, they need to be emotionally intelligent, they need to be resilient, they need to be inspirational, need to be great at giving feedback, brilliant at planning, all of these things. And they've got to be bigger, stronger, more knowledgeable than everybody else. And of course, no leader is perfect like that. They've all got their blind spots, their weaknesses, their great strengths. And I don't think we should be aiming for perfection, should we?
No, absolutely. And that's probably what we've done. Do you remember the competency frameworks?
Oh, yeah.
This sort of bingo card of where we try and tick all the boxes. I think you and I have worked in organisations. Well, I probably developed them where we had 50 different behavioural indicators, and then we would have the kind of positive and the negative.
Yeah, the contraindicators.
Yeah,
And
and then we'd have it in levels. So it wasn't just
oh, God,
one
yeah.
for every leader. It would be, if you're a junior leader, if you're a middle leader, if you're a senior leader. Oh God. I mean, I've written them and I've presented them, and I know that, I've been so proud of the team, look what we've done, and they kind of nod and then never look at it again.
Never use them. And that's one of the challenges, isn't it, with these competency frameworks, is, they're so confusing. I remember interviewing to promote somebody into a leadership role with another leader. So I was interviewing with this other leader. And we'd introduced this competency framework that we were really proud of. And I couldn't understand why the leader I was interviewing with didn't make eye contact with the person that they were interviewing throughout the entire interview. They were just looking down at this bit of paper. And I said to him afterwards, I was like, maybe we could have done with a bit more engaging, with the individual. And he was like, yeah, but I was trying to tick off the competencies. It became all about ticking boxes and filling out the form, and nobody can remember them, can they? Once you go past 3, nobody's going to remember them. It's a bit like values. We used to, at the BBC, have our values on the back of our lanyards. And I would say, right, put the lanyard down so you can't see. Now tell us what the values were. And there were 5, and nobody could ever remember more than 3. So they're confusing. Once you get past 3 competencies, kind of forget it. But also, I think by positioning leadership as this, you've got to be good at everything, they end up feeling like they're kind of constantly falling short, don't they? I'm good at that, but I'm not good at that. Therefore, I'm not the complete leader. And the reality is that they don't need to be superheroes. The best leaders, as you described earlier, are those who see their primary role as getting the best from their teams. And that's a very different job to the way that we've positioned it.
Absolutely. And then when we think about the training that we then offer to help them, we do that kind of sheep dip, don't we? Where everyone gets the same training. We might split it into, this is for senior leaders because they're special.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether your experience, your learning preferences, maybe we don't think about what's going on perhaps for them and their team. Or even worse, we kind of force them to come. So let's make it mandatory, so they won't turn up.
And that's awful, isn't it? That we are so lacking in confidence in our product of a leadership development program that we have to force people to come because we don't think they'll show up. Now, again, I know that sometimes we hear that, leaders are too busy and that they haven't got the time, and it makes it really difficult, and it's really important that they do this training. But if you've made it mandatory, they are not in the right headspace to learn. I mean,
childlike behaviour, isn't it? You feel you're constrained. It's like, now you're forcing me. So even if it's good, I'm not going to be happy about it.
Yeah, they're turning up with that sort of slightly sulky teenager attitude before. So they're not leaning in and curious. And so, the kind of classic sheep dip mandatory training programs that are very expensive, that take a long time, and also are incredibly theoretical and academic. Do you remember again, leaders that we worked with, they loved a big academic leadership program, didn't they? They all wanted to go to Harvard. They all wanted to go to INSEAD or London Business School. They had academic qualifications coming out of every pore. They didn't need another academic qualification. They didn't need more theory. They really needed practical rehearsals, trying stuff out, experimenting, getting more comfortable with some of these techniques. They needed tools that would help them in the moment. Like, how does this help me with tomorrow's team conflict or decision that I've got to make? So I think you're right. I think that kind of, the classic approach where we would put on the leadership development program and then we would kind of, highlight the high potentials who would go on it. And we'll talk about high potentials a bit later on. So I think, we've got these kind of complicated descriptions of the kind of skills you've got to have and all the things you've got to be as a leader, which is re-emphasizing this idea of leader as superhero. The competencies are confusing. They can't remember it. We're then forcing them into mandatory training, which takes them away from the day job, which they can ill afford. They are reluctant, resistant. They're not perhaps engaged in the training, even if it's great training. But equally, it tends to be a bit academic. It tends to be a bit theoretical. So now that we've kind of completely dissed all of our leadership development approaches, let's have a look at what the new trends are and what we're seeing is actually working. And I think, we'll kick off with the first one, which is, instead of trying to define who they are and what we want them to be, instead of having these long lists of competencies and attributes, what we're seeing with this first trend, which I think is so powerful, is that the more progressive companies are just really clear on a few things that they want their leaders to actually do. So it's not who they want them to be, skills, attributes, mindsets, long lists, a few things that they want them to do in relation to their people.
Yeah. It's just so refreshing. And I think when we first started 10 years ago, there was so little on this. And now every month I'm seeing another organization that's doing this, that's coming up with really simple outcomes. So we've got a couple of examples to share with you. So Salesforce is one where they say 3 things: build a great team, be a great person to work with, deliver great results together. So really simple. These are 3 things we expect you to do. And our all-time favorite is SAP. We expect you to do these 3 things: coach your team, show appreciation, and lead with trust. And I think when we actually break that down, even though it sounds a bit simplistic, isn't that what we want leaders to do? Isn't that what we want as employees of those leaders?
Completely. And I think, we talk about high performing teams, or we talk about, high levels of engagement, or we talk about, well-being, and we talk about all this stuff. But actually what SAP have really cleverly done is that they have narrowed it down to being very clear about what the leader needs to do to create those environments.
Yeah.
So coach your team. So that's all about high performance, showing appreciation. That's about, that in high levels of engagement. We know that regular, frequent appreciation and recognition leads to higher engagement. And then this lead with trust, which is so simple, difficult to do, but so important, because we know, if you look at the work from, say, Paul Zak, you've got KPIs going in the right direction, productivity, innovation, performance, even stress levels. The KPIs go in the right direction when people feel trusted. What I also love about what Salesforce and SAP are doing is that they hold leaders accountable for this. So instead of the HR team focusing all their efforts on the carrot, here's some more training, here's another academic course you can go on, they're saying, we're going to be very clear on the outcomes that we expect from you. How you do that is up to you. We'll coach you. We can help you if you're not sure, but we are going to measure it. So we're going to measure it through regular pulse surveys. So they'll ask questions like, does your leader help coach you to do a better job? Does your leader show you that you are appreciated regularly? Does your leader create an environment where you can do your best work because you've got autonomy? They probably phrase it slightly snappier than that.
Yeah.
But if you're not getting decent marks in these regular pulse surveys, I think they do it quarterly, then you don't get to go on and manage more people. Because actually they're saying it's too important.
Yeah, and so it should be. We hold leaders to account for every other aspect of their business, don't we, in terms of their customers, their budgets, but we kind of just don't do this.
No, and in fact, how many times have we had arguments at the board where the board wanted to cover up the results of the survey because they didn't like what it was telling them. So you get into this annual bun fight because, we can't possibly put this out. But what Salesforce and SAP say is, no, if we say people leadership matters in the same way that the finances matter and the customer matters, then why wouldn't we?
Absolutely.
Why wouldn't we hold people
I think it's Salesforce as well that they say they do it so that people internally can see which team they want to work in. Again, so transparent about, look at that team's scores. That's somewhere that I'd like to maybe work in.
Exactly.
Next.
Yeah, exactly. So that internal mobility is being
Yeah.
supported by it. So the better leaders attract the better people.
And of course,
Um,
you're going to give them some time, because we all know, I remember having leaders where maybe they were new into the role and they were having to perhaps sort out the mess that the last leader left behind. And they were having difficult conversations and
yeah,
trying to kind of raise the bar in their team. And of course,
yeah.
if you were asking them the survey, the scores would be bad. So, but we know these leaders, we would know when to kind of, we need to give this a bit more time because we appreciate what's going on for them. So it's not black and white either.
No, no, no. It's not like you get one bad quarter's march and you're out. But I think it's looking at trend data, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in the end, if you haven't got leaders that are able to say, my team are coached to higher performance, feel appreciated and recognised, and I've created an environment where they feel trusted, then we don't want you to be a leader in the future. So it's that trend data. So I think that accountability is really important, but
Yeah.
linked to very simple, no more than 3 outcomes that you want from them. Let's have a look at the second trend that we're seeing, which again, I think is something that has real value and is not an area perhaps that we've focused on as much. We've tended to say, these are the skills that we think the organization needs. Therefore, we'll put this training program together and then we'll make you go on to it. But as you said at the start, of course, leaders come with all sorts of different experiences. They are different capabilities, different learning styles, different issues. And that's what this second trend is about. It's that it's much more personalized, and the development is owned and led and driven by the leader themselves. It's not something that HR is going to do to them.
Yeah.
It's something that is their responsibility. Of course, we're going to work with them, but they own it and they drive it.
And it goes back to the trust point that you made earlier. We want to feel in control rather than being told what to do. So that really helps that autonomy of a leader to feel that they're responsible themselves to decide what's right for them.
Yeah.
So we know a couple of examples. So Pixar, they do some great things. Now, they run workshops for their leaders so that they can explore who they are, their leadership style, their strengths, their weaknesses, maybe an opportunity perhaps to reflect on the impact their leadership style has on their team. And then they decide, where do they want to focus? Where do they want to take their learning? And I really like that. And I think, again, today we've got AI there. So we don't even need to spoon feed the development to them. So imagine that manager has gone on the Pixar workshop. They could literally go on to ChatGPT and say, this is an area I'd like to develop, either a strength I want to get better at, or maybe something that maybe is holding me back. Give me some ideas about the top 5 TED Talks, or some nudges that I could apply every day, or what is my, how can I personalize my leadership development journey? So again, we've got to stop thinking that HR teams are going to need big budgets, big L&D teams, because there is so much that actually they can do themselves.
And it's just the polar opposite of we're going to put you through this sheep dip training, regardless of your interest, your style, your personality, your preferences,
Yeah.
where they're turning up because they have to, they're annoyed because they've got having to take a day out of a very busy schedule. And instead, it's about saying, you're a grown up. If you've taken on the responsibility of leadership, then we expect you to be curious about your own development. We expect you to continually grow. And I love this idea of kind of our role in HR becoming less about doing it to them and more about giving them the tools that they can do it for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
We're
some,
creating the environment, aren't we?
exactly.
And I think we miss that point so often.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people are listening to this and they're thinking, oh, I don't know where to start with this, then something that we've developed that you can get your hands on is a leadership diagnostic tool. And it just kind of helps leaders to figure out their style and areas to focus on. So we'll put the link to that, and you can
Yeah.
go and have a look at that. We'll put that in the show notes, in the podcast notes. Okay, let's have a look then at the third trend that we're seeing, which is all about broadening out the kind of leadership pool. Who gets leadership development?
Yeah.
Because again, because it was so expensive, we've tended to go, well, this has only got to be for high potentials. So we've done our 9-box grids, haven't we, where we've kind of assessed them and we've put a few people into the top right-hand box, and they're the ones who are going to get it. And also we focused it on senior leaders, haven't we?
We have, and I think, again, as someone that came from a sort of talent management role, all of our time, our money was all around that kind of perceived 10% of the organization. And
Yeah.
again, I think thankfully we're seeing this move away from more about creating opportunities so that anyone who is interested in leadership can get something, can progress. They're not waiting to be tapped on the shoulder. They can find ways of getting exposure and learning that's going to help them if they want to apply for a leadership development role. So I know that so Standard Charter, for example, they said that they were focusing all of their efforts again on that kind of the senior leadership group. And we know that unfortunately we get a bit arrogant. We get a bit sort of like, well, this has worked for me in the past. You can't teach me anything. I know everything, font of all knowledge. And so they kind of clocked that and said, right, we're just going to move away from the resistant leaders, and we're going to invest all of our effort in emerging ones. So the people that are perhaps kind of more junior leadership roles, who are more open to change, who are, for this stuff to more likely to stick with them. And I think that's a real smart move. And Nestle have a great example where they just did what we call reframing. So instead of, when I'd be with a manager, I'd be talking about, tell me about your high potential. What are we going to do with them? How are we going to get them development? And they've just literally switched the conversation to say, instead of talking about that, I want you to think as a manager that everyone in your team has potential, because of course they have, and is ready for something new. So you're just reframing that question instead of getting them to talk about what they perceive as their high potential, and thinking about their broader HR team. Everyone has potential, is ready for a new challenge. And it might not be leadership, and that's fine. It might be becoming a deeper expert or whatever it might be. And I just think that's again a really smart move from them.
Yeah, and as we know, you and I, we've kind of produced high potential programs. I mean, for me, the high potential program was almost like the kiss of death. It's almost like anybody I put on a high potential program would either leave or get fired within the next year, because sometimes like their expectations are raised, aren't
Yeah.
they? Oh, I'm a high potential, therefore I must be getting my next leadership role. And then we wouldn't tell people who weren't put on the leadership high potential program, and then they'd be getting fed up.
Yeah, or the peers would be really pissed off because they found out,
Exactly.
why have they been put on
Yeah,
it?
why
Why
have they? And
haven't
we
I been
wouldn't dare tell
chosen?
them, would we? We wouldn't dare
No.
tell them they hadn't been chosen. Um,
I was with a client actually a few weeks ago, and they said that their high potential program is actually where leaders send people who actually are poor performers. So in the hope perhaps
Brilliant.
that they might learn something, but obviously, the wrong message there.
And I think CB did some great research a while ago, which said that around 70% of high potential programs deliver no return on investment
Oh, that doesn't
whatsoever.
surprise me.
Yeah, exactly. So broadening out our talent pool, not placing all of our bets on a very few, very senior, very expensive, and perhaps less curious, less open leaders, but instead broadening it out both in terms of hierarchy, and also in terms of the kind of the not the usual suspects, broadening that talent pool wider. Okay, so now we're going to just have a quick look at some of the new development techniques that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And how are they delivering leadership development in different ways? And I suppose the big themes here are practical, real life, short and sweet. Is probably a way of summing it up, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
I
we've
would
got some
say so.
examples, haven't we, we can
Yeah,
share?
yeah. And I think probably to add to that, the personalised bit. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I remember when we were at the BBC and we were running, we did some quite good leadership development, and we did try and keep it really
Well, you
practical,
had that
real life, short
funky
and sweet.
leadership
It
playlist.
was good. So we were
That was
playing on the
really ahead of its
products.
time,
Was
yeah.
a bit ahead of its time. But within that, I can remember because we had to kind of test out the suppliers that we were using, and there was one awful session. Well, it was awful for me, where we had to sit in a circle, and then we had a purple cushion, and you had to pass around the purple cushion and talk about how you were feeling. And I don't know about, well, I know you, Lucy. It's our biggest dread, anything like that. It's just, I remember just feeling so awful, embarrassed. It's really not my sort of development. And I was trying to imagine the kind of the journalists at the BBC kind of going, oh,
They
yeah,
were probably sitting
lovely.
there writing up the story about waste of taxpayers' money, BBC licence fee payers' money whilst they were on it. At least they
Exactly.
didn't make you sing a song. I've been on a
Oh,
leadership development program where there's this whole thing about us, the idea of, creating a choir and a team, and we all had to sing. And I can still feel the agony.
oh,
It just makes me want to kind of crawl into a hole when I think
yeah.
about that.
And I think that's where we get to it needs to be personalized, because that's not the sort of thing that you and I would want to do. And being forced into doing that, if it's not your style, is kind of, we switch people off. So I think this practical idea is really good. So we know, like American Water, when they come together, leaders for development, they actually solve business problems. So that just makes so much more sense, doesn't it? It's grounded in what is going on, what are you struggling with, how can we solve it together, and learning through solving business problems. So
Yeah,
I
and I
really,
think,
really like
most leaders would go, yeah, okay,
that.
I'll go
Yes,
along to that because actually I can get some help with the problem and I'm being developed at the same time. That makes sense.
absolutely.
I think also one of the other development techniques I like is looking at mentoring, but not in the kind of classic big mentoring program where HR writes all the policies and the rules and the training and owns it, but actually just very informal. So Abercrombie, Paramount, they have this informal pop-up mentoring, don't they? And that kind of it's
Yeah,
really informal.
yeah,
There's not a big manual, there's not a training program that you have to go on. It just says anyone anywhere in the organization can book a chat, a coffee with anyone else in the organization if they believe they could help them develop. And you're not restricted. You can't sort of say, like, well, here's my mentor for the next year.
yeah.
You could have
Well,
3 mentors, 10 mentors, doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's about what you need, but you're owning and driving it.
yeah.
And again, there are some great kind of digital solutions that can help people connect. So it's the mechanics of connecting people, but it's about HR being quite hands off around
Yeah,
that and just allowing people to own it and drive it for themselves.
love that. And I think, again, we're seeing this more peer to peer. So you have so much knowledge already in your organization. You don't need to bring in people like Lucy and I. You can learn from each other. So we have Patagonia, so they have what they call leadership circles, where leaders come together to share their advice, their challenges, their learning. Patreon use their comms channel. So again, are we making as much use of our comms channels? If you're on Slack or MS Teams, and you can create a kind of like a community, because we know managers, they're time poor, to have something that's kind of in where they're working anyway is much more helpful, where they might be, popping in a question of like, I'm struggling with this. They don't need to give confidential information away, but getting support from each other, I really like. And Novo Nordisk, the HR team, set up this kind of very informal manager club. So, once a month or whatever it might be, we come together and we talk about a particular issue. So we might talk about hybrid working or having difficult conversations, or but very informal. Not like I used to do manager development, where I'd go in with my PowerPoint slides and this is how you do the process. It's nothing to do with process. It's just how can we get better at having these conversations?
And it's hard for us in HR sometimes, isn't it? Because we think we're asking managers to invest an hour of their time. We know they're time poor, and I haven't got 25 pages of slide deck to show them. I'm not going in as the expert. I'm going in as a facilitator to help them learn from each other. And that takes quite a bit of confidence.
It does.
But I think, we know from having worked with clients where we've suggested this and then they've picked it up and they've run with it, that actually it goes so well. Leaders love it and they are genuinely learning. And the other thing, just I suppose to add to that, is the temptation then is to make it mandatory because they're worried that people won't come. And what we would suggest is, start with a few early adopters, just get it going, get it building momentum, get people talking about it. And then they'll be the ones saying, oh, I attended this brilliant session. And it builds from there rather than this is your date and you've got to go and chat to people. Yeah. So again, this doesn't cost anything apart from the manager's time. And another trend that we're seeing with development techniques that costs almost nothing is this idea of nudges, leadership nudges. So people will already be familiar with nudge theory. It's this kind of idea that if you prompt somebody to try something new or a different approach at the point where they're just about to do it or at the point of need, then that can be a very impactful, powerful way of doing it. It's not about putting them on a training program 3 months earlier because they'll forget it. It's about, when's the best time to nudge them. So classically, Google use these, don't they?
Yeah.
So Google they call their nudges whispers. So they have things like they have an automated email that goes to the hiring manager on the Sunday night before the person starts, because that's when the manager's thinking about it. Isn't it?
Oh no!
I looked at my diary. Oh no, Johnny's starting with me tomorrow. Oh bloody hell! What am I going to do? And but what it says is just a reminder. Johnny's starting with you tomorrow. Just make sure that they've got a buddy, book a check-in, and make sure that they know your door's always open. Really simple, but helping them to think about leadership at the point where they might need it. So I think, again, just changes the role of HR. A lot of the time we are asking our leaders for information or telling them they've got to do stuff. But actually these little prompts around recognition or trust or helping them learn or career development or performance, these little nudges, you're not going to change the world, but it can be so powerful, can't it?
Yeah, I love that idea. And we should do a little plug, Lucy.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have a platform that is kind of almost nudge-based. So it's built on the same principles. It's we do bite-sized learning, practical nudges, short 5-minute videos, toolkits that you can read in a minute, and we try and make it really practical and relevant to what leaders are dealing with. So if you want to check it out, have a look on just type in Disruptive Leaders or go on our Disruptive HR website and you'll find it there if you're interested.
I'll put the link in the post as well.
Oh, cool. Good.
And on that sales push, we'll wrap it up.
Felt like there was just a little opportunity there.
Absolutely. So leadership development doesn't have to mean long training programs or complicated frameworks. It's about just being really clear on the outcomes that you want. What do you want them to do, not who you want them to be. Letting leaders own their own development, drive it, own it, self-reflection, learn the way that they need and want to learn. It's about broadening out who we invest in. And obviously, if we're doing it in more cost-effective, cheaper ways, then that makes it feasible. And it's about making learning practical, real, and accessible. I think that's probably it for today, isn't it? It's been great chatting to you. And thanks so much for listening in. If you're enjoying it, make sure you subscribe. We're also available on YouTube if you prefer to get your podcasts that way. Just check out HR Disrupted on YouTube. But that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be speaking to you next time. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hi, I hope you found this useful. If you'd like more videos like this, then make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications.